All right, take three. So first one, I screwed up the share screen. Second one, uh, the struggles of working from home. So, hey everybody, welcome to assignment 8 recap video and an important Sosa talk on some history needed in order for the next parts of class to kind of make sense. So, super important video. Thank you for clicking. Thank you for watching. To talk about a couple things, before we even get to review of assignment 8, I want to talk to you about some history and some definitions that will help us unpack what the heck is going on with this expansion in abolition movement and Missouri Compromise. So, first, I want you to know that the controversy over slavery existed since the foundation of America. Since the Constitution was created, and the Declaration of Independence actually, had to figure out, is America going to be a land in which slavery can exist? Or is it going to be a land in which it's outlawed and banned or abolished? We made the decision to, keep the institution of slavery and saw it as a necessary evil. But in the Constitution, in 1808, it says that we can talk about slavery again. When they created the Constitution, they said we cannot discuss if we should ban slavery or keep it or anything until 1808. So, and in 1808, the United States banned the international slave trade. So they tried to basically say there can be no more trade in which Africans were enslaved and then brought to the United States. They said that was banned. Of course, that got in illegal trade that happened, but they almost actually said there was no need for international slave trade because enslaved Africans were having families and having babies, and there was a natural growth of the slave population, so there was no need for the slave trades, but slavery continued. So that was that. And then, to make things worse, westward expansion, remember Manifest Destiny? This wonderful, glorious time for America to expand west and gain new land and reach our goals. Well, there was a huge problem in all of that. Not only was the treatment and the removal of Native Americans off of their land, but, well, if you expand west, you gain more land, you get more states. Are those states going to be states that have slavery? Or are they going to ban slavery? America had to figure out what they were going to do. And so you had this growing controversy between what's called a free state and what's called a slave state. I have little note cards that'll probably be posted up, but I want to go to our first share screen, hopefully do it right this time. So, first one, let's go here, share this. Now, okay, it's important to know a couple definitions. Free state, okay? A free state is a state that outlawed, banned the use of slavery, okay? Those were northern states. States like Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. 11 states were considered free states prior to 1820. Then there were slave states, which were states that allowed for the use of slavery. And those, again, were typically southern states, where you had pretty much, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, all those southern states were considered slave states, okay? So those key terms are going to keep popping up when we look at the Missouri Compromise and the assignment. So just get ready for that. Let me see if I can get to the next assignment. Here we go, perfect. All right, so now to review assignment 8. We're going to review the video on the Missouri Compromise. Then we're going to go look at the article that was about the Missouri Compromise. So some things will seem redundant, which is good. Okay, that means you've got it. Some key vocab to understand first, before we dive into anything. The word abolish means to get rid of something. Okay, so and the abolition movement is the movement to get rid of slavery. Okay, um, and then there's this thing called popular sovereignty, which comes up with the Missouri Compromise video. That basically means to let the people of a state decide something. Sovereignty means power. Popular is a reference to people, so people having the power or having the say over something. So those two things come up. Now, the video. Okay, so question 1. What is the big problem described in the video? The video talks about, well, the basic problem is Missouri wants to come in as a new state, okay, a slave state. The bigger problem is that if Missouri comes in as a slave state, it's going to upset an existing balance between the number of free states and the number of slave states, okay? There were 11 free states and 11 slave states. If Missouri came in as a slave state, it would be now 12 to 11. Uh-oh, things are a problem. So they came up with the Missouri Compromise. There are 2 parts according to the video, and actually kind of 3. The reading goes into it. But the 2 parts. Maine, nice, I know, look at Sosa, small box. Maine, they said, okay, if adding 1 state's going to be an issue, why don't we just add 2 states? So Maine got carved out of Massachusetts, entered as a free state, okay, which means it did not have slavery. And then Missouri would enter as a slave state, and thus the balance between free and slave states was preserved. And the second part is that slavery will be banned areas of the United States north of this parallel line, 36°30 line, which limited slavery. If you want to take a look, this is essentially what the Missouri Compromise created, okay? So these red states were all of the slave states, these blue states were all of the free states, and that blue line here extended basically across the United States. And according to the compromise, everything north of that line was to be then, from that point on, considered a free state. Everything south, whenever a new state was created, and anything south of it would be considered a slave state. So the compromise was great at just stalling, basically, a huge problem. Okay. There's another map of the thing. So to unpack it more, now that you have the basics of the Missouri Compromise, I want to unpack a little bit about the deeper struggles that were existing between the North and the South at the time. Okay, there's more complexities here than just, the number of free and slave states. Okay, so the second part of assignment 8 was to look at the deeper issues going on that existed even in the North and the South. So let's go back to share screen, and boom. So after you read I hope be sure you read the whole thing. It kind of hints us into the next couple assignments, but question 1 for the article was, what caused slavery to become even more cruel during the 1820s and 30s? Well, slaves, as we'll see in the next couple assignments, started to rebel against their white slave owners in different forms of resistance, which was part of assignments 9, 10, 11, and 12. And those slaves even started to kill white people. And so the white slave owners responded by increasing the intensity of slavery in hopes to try and scare slaves back into submission, to make them more afraid to do anything against the white slave owners. So by the 1820s and 30s, a divide emerged between the North and the South. What was happening that caused this divide? What started to happen was the shift in economics. Okay, you had and in power, but for the most part, you had the North becoming a more advanced economy. Remember mill times and industrialization? All of that was really happening in the North. Factories, different modes of transportation, all that development was up top in the North. Okay, all of that was actually creating the North as a stronger economic system than the South. Okay, And the South, okay, was seen as this old agricultural society. They were like behind the times. There weren't many factories there. Everything was still based off of farming. It was very much kind of like stuck in the mud. North was running away, doing great, and the South was definitely behind the times. Okay, so you had this divide between North and South. Okay, question 3, matching this divide, how was Congress divided? Well, it was divided between free states, 11, and slave states, 11. Okay, easy again, remember the balance going back to the video. Then, question 4, what caused the North to panic in 1820? Well, the big cause was this darn state, Missouri, started to petition for its entrance as a new state into the United States, but the problem to the Northerners was, it would be a slave state, okay? Which would, again, mess up the balance between free and slave states. Slave states would outnumber free states. So what do? Just like the video says, Congress, so question 5, so what did Congress, mainly this guy Henry Clay, an awesome, one of my favorite historical figures, do about the fear of the North and the issue with Missouri? They said, well, let's just make 2 states, okay, to maintain the balance. Missouri will be a slave state, and like Massachusetts has this hunk of land up north, let's carve it out, let's make it Maine, and it's another state, and then a balance is created, everybody's happy, woo, for now, okay? So they kind of delayed this controversy. So, question 6. On top of all of this, the Missouri Compromise and trying to maintain the balance, you had the rise of the Abolition Movement, okay? You had, again, to abolish means to end slavery. So there's this growing movement in the North and a little bit in the South in which people were trying to get rid of the institution of slavery, try to absolutely abolish it from America. Let's start to unpack this abolition movement. Let's go back to split screen or share screen. I'm sorry. All right. So, question 6: abolitionists advocated or supported abolishing slavery, getting rid of slavery, but not everyone agreed with them. Okay. At this time, abolitionists started to mainly do things by publishing books and newspapers, starting to spread the word and make the argument as to why slavery was unjust. But a lot of people disliked abolitionists, even in the North. So here are some of the opposing views. How did others in the North and South feel about the work and the opinion of abolitionists? So in the South, some Southerners stopped the delivery of the books and newspapers, so their argument was never actually heard. Some Northerners benefited from slavery, so they wanted abolitionists to stop. Well, think about it. Why did Northerners benefit from slavery? Go back to what we talked about with the factories, okay? Northern factories were making what? Textiles, clothing. In order to make textiles and clothing, what do you need? Cotton. In order for cotton, and where is cotton being produced? In the South. How does the South get the cotton? What type of labor? Slaves. So all of the Northern economic system was dependent on Southern agriculture, which was farmed by slaves. So if you stopped slavery, how would you get that amount of cotton to produce for the factories? So many Northerners panicked by that moment. All right. Northerners were also just afraid of change. If everything's kind of fine, so just leave it as is. And so some Northerners decided to get a little intense and burn the newspaper offices of abolitionists, and they actually killed an abolitionist. I don't know exactly which abolitionist they're referring to, so I need to do some more research on that. And in the South, just as you probably imagined, Southerners hated abolitionists. Most of them were Northerners. So Southerners thought that the North, didn't have a right to say anything about the South. Right? If you're in the North, you have nothing to say about what's going on in the South. Just leave us alone. And all of these abolitionists were critiquing the institution of slavery. So this part's kind of crucial. These are 2 big ideas, and one's super hypocritical. But the first one is like Southerners saw all of these abolition arguments as this critique of their beloved South, right? They loved the culture and the lifestyle of the South, which was old. So if you critique a part of that culture, which was the main part of that culture, slavery, it's an attack on the South. They took it very personally. And then the other thing is this part. Southerners didn't want their quote-unquote freedom of owning property to be taken away. If you really think about that, it's ridiculous. The slave owners were like they were enslaving people, taking away their freedom in order to work for them. And then as soon as slave owners had a threat to their property, they started to fear this loss of freedom. It was like, oh God, it's so hypocritical. Like you're not seeing the whole picture when you're arguing this point. Southerners just, I didn't get that. That part makes me angry. All right, so question 7. This chapter and the video focused a lot on the power of fear, okay? What made Northerners afraid? Northerners were mostly afraid of losing power and influence to slave states. They wanted to maintain their voice in Congress. They didn't want anything to hurt the economic success of the North. But I think Southerners were probably a little bit more clearly afraid. Here's what they were afraid of. They were afraid of the loss of their economic influence to the North. Again, the North was advancing, the South was behind. That created this divide and this suspicion. The South felt like their lifestyle and culture was being damaged by the abolition movement. You know, you attack the institution of slavery, they feel uneasy about it. Again, this criticism of the beloved South, very personal. And finally, again, just kind of summing it up, but this loss of power to the northern states. And finally here, the last question is, where did northern and southern fears seem to be coming from? What were they afraid of losing? And you could boil it down to power and influence. What these northern and southern states wanted to do was maintain their societies, but also maintain their power. And they had this growing suspicion that started to develop. The North was afraid that if the South got power, they would start to spread slavery and limit what the North was doing. So everything the southern states were doing, Northerners suspected and were a little bit suspicious of. And the South, where this home for abolition, where slaves would escape to, the South started to see everything the North was doing as suspicious, as trying to get more power, as trying to get more economic wealth. And you had this growing divide between northern and southern states. And so it started early in United States history, but this Missouri Compromise was kind of the first full awakening of this tension that was developing between North and the South. So hopefully Take 3 worked. I hope you guys are doing well, you're staying safe, and you'll see Sosa in a box again next week. Be good.